Hello and welcome back to the channel. Well, today I'm trying a different type of video. As we're at the end of the year, I thought I would do a recap on the models and do them as a tier list. However, I didn't realise just how many models I'd done. So I don't think anyone really wants to sit through a 3-hour video of all the models. So what I've done, I've broken them down into 3 sections. Now this first section is going to be aircraft, so planes and helicopters. The second one that I will do will be tanks and tank destroyers, and then the third one will be boats, ships, and anything else that's left. So let's get underway. Now first of all, we have got the J-Star, the F117 Nighthawk. This was a real surprise to me because all the photographs I've ever seen of this, they just don't do it justice at all. It's almost like, well, obviously this is a stealth aircraft, and it's almost like it's a stealth aircraft to cameras as well, because even the one that I did, I wouldn't say takes a particularly good photograph. It's so much more impressive in real life. This is the sort of aircraft really that, because of all the different angles that you need to get something that's reasonably accurate, it's a big task. In fact, it's one that I thought I wasn't expecting a lot from it, I have to say, and yet it really does deliver. It's not perfect by any means. There's a few bits on it that are very fragile, and there's a couple of bits I had to ever so slightly adapt. But J-Star have taken, they've taken a really good go at this, and they've almost succeeded. It's very good. It's not going to be excellent, but it's certainly very good indeed. And also, one of the nice things about this is that it was 2251, and it's a fair size model. It's about 50 centimeters long. It's just very good, and hats off to J-Star for even attempting it and getting as close as they did. Very well done. Second one on our list is the F14 from Harrier. Oh, I wanted to like this so much. It's again, it's a very big model. This one's a good 55, nearly 60 centimeters long, and on first glance, it's a real showstopper. Unfortunately, it's the second glance and then the third glance and whatever that you start to realise, that's not quite right, and various different other bits and pieces with it. It's the build process is very strange on it, and some of the decisions that they've made are very questionable. So, for instance, with the elevators at the back, they're actually offset on the axle, and what that means is that they will constantly drop down towards the back. They won't stay level. Another thing is the wings, I believe, if I remember rightly, they're only held on by like 4 studs each, and you're asking them they're quite heavy wings, and you're asking them to swing. That's not good. Some of the process is asking you to build things in place that really should be built separately and then attached. And the overall look isn't quite right with it. I think with Harrier, the 3 models that I did, they're very much a traffic light sort of system with this. There's definitely a red, an amber, and a green. So I'm afraid this is going to go into the orange pile. It's not. I wouldn't say it's not worth getting. This costs 32, which is quite a lot. I mean, you do get a big model with it, but it's not the best. It could have been, but it's not. Now, the Wange P51 Mustang. The 2 Mustangs that I've got on here are obviously both very similar. They're both Mustangs, but they are very different. The Wange is considerably less pieces. It's probably far easier of the 2 to build, and it is considerably larger than the QuanGuan one. But that's not to say that there's not actually a great deal of difference between the 2 in lots of ways. If you could mix them both up, I would say you get something very close to being perfect. But with both of them, there's just a little bit there's a few things just not quite right with both of them, but they are very good. Now, one of the nice things about the Wange version of the Mustang was it was slightly cheaper, and it comes out at $1367. So it is the cheaper of the two, and it is the bigger of the two. But for me, it's, well, really, I almost need a sort of somewhere between the yellow and the green, really. But I'm going to put it as very good, because I don't think anyone's going to be hugely disappointed if they get it. Now, the H20. This one has me conflicted, because it's a huge model. It's a good 60 centimetres wide from wingtip to wingtip. And the finished model is very good, is excellent. You also get 5 minifigures, if I remember rightly, with it, which is slightly unusual to get that many with a plane. But it was the build process. It was just a bit grindy for me, and it wasn't the cheapest in the world. It was $39.40, which I think if this had been around the £30 mark, $28.32, something like that, then it would be placed higher than it actually is. But it does leave a very good model, if slightly overpriced, in my opinion. So for that reason, I think we're going to go with yellow there. Now, the Kazi Mi-28, the small range of helicopters that they do. I actually really liked the Mi-28. I thought it was a really, really good model. One of the nice things about it is that there is is the use of colour in it. The colour doesn't detract from the actual thing itself as well. It just makes it more interesting to me. Very simple to build. Ideal as a pocket money aircraft. Came out at £9.68, so definitely in that pocket money range. The munitions under the wings are quite fragile, and unfortunately the gun at the front doesn't rotate around. But they're relatively minor things. I mean, one of the things you do have with just about any sort of aircraft is the munitions that are strung under any wing or any body do tend to be fragile, so I can't really penalise that unless I penalise everything. But this I thought was very good, and it was a really good price as well. And I think with the range that Kazi do, I think they've got 8 or 9 helicopters all in the same scale, and I think that they would work really nicely together as a collection. So, for that reason, I'm going to pop that there. Right, back to J-Star, or the Harrier. This was the only Harrier that I could find on the market. I couldn't, even Kobe, I couldn't do one. And I'm not going to lie, it was a real disappointment. Very, very strange build. You actually spend a fair bit of time and effort in the cockpit, and yet the canopy doesn't actually reach the sides. When you close it, there's a big gap. It was just all a bit weird. The other thing was the nozzles for the engines, which are on the side of the plane, which helped obviously to make it hover and fly backwards and that sort of thing. You spend quite a while building those and making sure that they can rotate around, and then later on in the build you cover them up so that you can't move them and you can barely see them. It was just very, very strange. I mean, the overall look wasn't too bad, but it really wasn't great. I mean, the only saving grace for this was the fact it was £14.64, and it's the only Harrier that I can find. But even with those 2 pluses, I'm afraid it's going to be my first don't bother. Now, the QuanGuan P51 Mustang. Pretty much everything I said about the Wange Mustang applies here. They're different, but they're both good. The QuanGuan one does have a lot more colour. It is a slightly smaller scale, but actually, in a way, I think it works better as a slightly smaller scale. And the way I think that between the two of them is, if my studio is on fire and I can only grab one of them, I think it would be the QuanGuan one, especially as it comes with a stand, And one thing I found works really nicely is with others in the QuanGuan range of the World War II fighters, because they all have stands, so you can pose them in slightly different positions, and it works really, really well when you put them all together on a shelf. So it is slightly more expensive than the Wange one. Now this one comes in at $15.89, so £2 something more expensive. But in a way, I do think it's worth it. So it's also going in as very good. I say whichever one of those two Mustangs you get, I think you'll be happy with. Now, Sembo's J88, which I think comes from their Steel Empires series, which I'm assuming is aimed at kids, although this is a model of two halves almost, in that they have spent a fair bit of time and effort in creating a system where the ailerons will go up and down on gears from a knob that's twisted on the back of the fuselage, the roof of the fuselage, which is a nice idea in theory, but in practice it doesn't really work. It ends up having the same problem that the F-14 had with its elevators. The ailerons themselves weigh so much, and there isn't a massive amount of inertia in the gearing system, so that it constantly flops down. There are some nice touches in the aircraft, but it's really not the greatest. And if you can find another model of a J88, even at the price that they charged this, which was it wasn't. It was £23.03. Actually, that's quite expensive for what it is. Again, I could do with probably a halfway between an orange and a red. There aren't many JU88s around, and I think if you're one of those people that takes a basic build and then does your own thing to it, that's a really good one to do it to. You've got the basic stuff there. I'd strip out all the gears that don't really add anything to it apart from complexity. It's got a few problems, but it's got quite a few problems. But it's not the worst model in the world. It's just rather expensive for what it is. But this one, this is the Wange SR71. This is totally the opposite way, in that this was £9. Now it's only 180 something bricks, and to be honest with you, it would have taken me less than an hour to do had I not stopped down a break in the middle of it. But it's excellent. It is so good, so accurate to the actual thing, the dimensions, just everything about it are really, really good. It's difficult for me to not praise this enough, to be honest. The only problem really that I found with it was just the length of time that it took. It was sort of over too quickly. But this would be a really good model for somebody who's got any dexterity issues in their hands. Giving it to a capable young child to do, it's just very, very good. It's brilliant. And for £9, you just can't knock it at all. Now, one of the things is that since I bought this, which was right back in the spring, I've seen this several times now for less money. I've also seen it for a lot more money, but I've seen this down at around the £5 mark. So if you see it and you've not got it, you won't be sorry at all about this. The only thing detrimental to it are the stickers on it. I found that they weren't the greatest stickers. They did curl up a little bit on the corners, like some of the times the cheapest stickers do. But apart from that, it's a very good model. And the first one that I'm definitely going to put up in excellent. Car's the Apache. Everything that I said about the Mi-28 applies to the Apache, except that I found this slightly more fragile. I didn't think that the finished model looked quite as good, but then this is just mono black all over. I mean, it's exactly the same things apply. The under-wing munitions were very flimsy. This one does at least have the machine gun underneath the nose, does rotate around. It's the same price. Yeah, £9.68. But I, in my own personal opinion, I don't think it was quite as good. And the canopy, I remember, is created in a very different way from the Mi-28, and I kept knocking it off. So for that reason, it's going to go there. But as I said about the Mi-28, if you get the whole collection, I think they would look really, really good together. Back to Wange. Oh, the Catalina. This was one of those that I had high hopes for, and it didn't let me down. I just think this is excellent all the way through. There's very little to not like about this thing. It was 3136, which was the only issue that I can say about it. But again, it's one of those that since I bought this back in the springtime, I've seen it around a few times. I've seen it down as low as, I think, about £5. Certainly under 20 is not at all difficult to achieve. And at that price, it's absolutely still. It's a reasonably large model. Not the largest here, but it's a good 45-50 centimetres wide from wingtip to wingtip. But it's very accurate. Good use of custom pieces. Good use of transfers or decals or whatever it is, stickers, I can't remember now. But yeah, very good indeed. And again, that's going up into excellent. Right, the A10, this is the first model I've done by Xingbao. I'd been looking at the Kobe version of this, which is quite stunning. And then out of the blue, I found this. I'd seen a couple around that I didn't really like the look of, but this, well, again, this didn't let me down at all. It's as good. In fact, it was probably better than I hoped it would be. And one of the nice things was actually the under-wing mounted armaments were not that fragile. They stay on pretty well. So, yeah, I was really, really pleasantly surprised by this one. And this one cost me £23.03, which I would say is probably about spot on. So again, this one going up there. About the only thing that I would have liked more from that would have been a little bit of colour to it. I don't quite understand why a lot of these Chinese companies don't, either with their printed bricks or with their stickers and decals, just put a little bit of colour in. It makes so much of a difference when you get that. I mean, that's one of the things that's really nice about the F14, for instance, is you get that colour there, and also the Mi-28. And it really does make a difference. Same with the P51 from QuanGuan, and to a degree, although it's difficult to see from the thumbnail there is quite a bit of colour on that one too. It does make a difference. Now, the AH-12, the Viper. Funnily enough, again, this one suffers from the same problem. It needs a little bit of colour. This one's got printed bricks. But they're all a sort of dark grey, not quite a black. So you've got the United States roundels, which obviously is a white star on a blue circle with red and white lines coming off of it. In this, it's the grey of the machine itself, with some black lines in place of some of the colours, and it would have lifted this one out completely from where it is. Now, one of the nice things about this, apart from its size, is the fact that the rotors will actually fold up. So unlike the Cobra, which had only two rotors, the Viper does actually have four, which can make displaying some of the helicopters particularly challenging, because obviously the body is relatively narrow, but when you've got the rotors there, on a narrow shelf, it can be a little tricky trying to get the right sort of placement so that it stays on that shelf. So having the rotors having the ability to fold up is actually really, really useful. And this one came in at £11. Bargain, absolute bargain. I'd recommend this one every day of the week. Again, it's quite a big model. It's about 40 centimetres long. And then with the width of the rotors, probably not that far off. It's probably under 40 centimetres, but not by much. So that is also going in very good. Again, it's another one, perhaps a touch of colour would have lifted it up into excellent. Now, the MiG-29 from Rear Bricks. what can you say about this? Well, the first thing I say about this is this strikes me as probably the oldest model on here that's been in production, because the building technique and systems that we used on this just seem very old, or old-fashioned is probably the best way of putting it. Where, for instance, on something like the F117 or even the H20, they use the bricks in imaginative ways to create the shape. Not so much with the MiG-29. That was really pile bricks on and more bricks on and more bricks on until you get the shape. There was a lot of, there would be an hour spent at a time putting 200 bricks on, and you would look at the model and you think, well, what have I actually done? And it does sort of surprise me. I mean, the MiG-29 is obviously quite a famous aircraft, with the whole coating stud, the whole Cobra maneuver thing has been exported to just about everybody and their aunt through the world. And yet there's very few models of this particular aircraft, and most of the models that are out there are variations on this particular model. So, for instance, you get the Ghost of Kiev MiG-29, which is exactly the same model as this, but with different colour bricks. It's not particularly cheap either. This one came out as £31 and 3p, which, while it is a big model, again, this is well over 50 centimetres long. And believe me, it's very heavy because it's 2,000 odd bricks. You can certainly use it as a club. It's a tricky one. It's almost a case that it would be worth buying it alone, not to build it, but just to have all these extra bricks, because it roughly works out as a penny and a half a brick, which is really quite cheap, and then not do the model. There's a lot of awkwardness about the design as well. Rather than having smooth surfaces and outlines, it can be a little bit jerky. The nose is just terrible, and it's very, very fragile. Nothing really wants to stay attached underneath. The engine nozzles, if I remember rightly, they fell off very, very easily, and the nose is a bit wobbly on this. So I'm afraid the MiG-29, unless you want to buy it just for spare bricks, it's going in there. Now Kobe do quite a few MiG-29s from different countries, the old East Germany, Poland, and various others. They're actually not that much more expensive than this. So if you really want a MiG-29, I would save up and get something from Kobe on that. Right, this Messerschmitt, this 109. Now this didn't get its own video. It was in with the QuanGuan Messerschmitt when I did comparison video. I bought it thinking it was Slubin. It's not, however. Somebody did mention to me they thought it might be a company began with B, and I can't remember, Bingov or something like that. But even when I checked that company's website, I still couldn't find this on there. So I'm not entirely sure who makes this. And generally, it's pretty rubbish. It's by far the cheapest model that I've bought overall, not just in the planes, but even at the £3.30 that I paid for it, that's still overpriced. It's really not good at all. It's not even that easy to build. The fuselage isn't too bad, but the wings are unnecessarily complicated. The only saving grace I had with this is that I spent a very pleasant hour and a half, 2 hours with my little girl building this. But unfortunately, it still belongs in the do not buy section. Right, the QuanGuan Messerschmitt. Total opposite of that last Messerschmitt. This is again very, very good. Pretty much everything I said about the QuanGuan Mustang applies here as well. It's very good. It's got a good stand that you can pose it with. It looks really good in a collection of those, the same range aircraft together. Yeah, fab. And one of the nice things about this particular one is that although your bricks make up the camouflage on it, the different greens, you get a sticker system with it that then put curves and blur the straight edges of that camo system to make it look far more natural, which I did appreciate. This one was slightly more expensive than the £16.74, so not particularly that much more expensive. And yeah, there's absolutely no question at all about which of the two Messerschmitts to get. So that one will definitely go in the very good. Right, the J15 by Sembo. This one actually was a bit of a surprise because I hadn't done a Sembo model for quite some time when I did this. So this was a very pleasant surprise. This is great. Their instruction manuals are pretty much second to none. They have a very consistent way of building, certainly their planes. I don't think I've done enough of their other types of vehicles to really say on that yet, but their planes are just very, very good indeed. There's almost nothing to say badly about this. Even the munitions under the wings are pretty solid. This was very, very good indeed. And now the price on this one, $14.37, so definitely in the sort of pocket money range for kids. And I think whether you are an experienced builder or not, you would certainly enjoy it as an experienced builder, but you could certainly give this to a competent sort of 10, 12-year-old and they would just explode for joy. As I say, it's a very, very good model indeed. And at that sort of price as well, it's going up into the excellent pile. Right, J-Star Liberator, the B-24. Can I say about this? It's a pile of junk. It's absolutely terrible. I don't know what J-Star were thinking when they built this, and I don't know what they were thinking when they put it to market. And this was $17.39, and even if this had been the price of that 109 Messerschmitt at £3.30, I'd have still felt ripped off. It's a very generic model. It's not particularly difficult to do, although the way they've done it, the fuselage on hinges, I don't really feel works particularly well because it's very difficult to get the sides even. I find that one side will bend in more than the other, so you end up, when you look down on the fuselage, it sort of looks more banana-y than tapered. You could quite easily have put on the marketing pictures that go with this that this was a short Sterling or even a Halifax, and I wouldn't have blinked an eye about that. It's the worst kind of generic dross where I don't see anybody, even a young kid, buying this and not feeling deflated about it. So I'm afraid that definitely goes into the do not buy section. Right, now this was the first aircraft I did, I think, in this series, the Mi-24, the Hind. Now I really enjoyed doing this model. I think quite possibly because I'd done a particularly bad model the week before, and this went together really quite nicely. There's lots and lots to like here. The proportions absolutely right on it. The silhouette that it does is great. Everything fits together really, really nicely. Obviously the munitions on the little wings, they're a little fragile. The canopy as well, I seem to remember being a little fragile as well. It takes a while to get it into place, but then doesn't really want to lift up afterwards. Say if you've got your minifigures and you pop them in the pilot seats, you pretty much want to leave them there. The other thing I found with it was that because there is an internal compartment with seating there for transportation of troops, etc., during the build I kept finding that my little finger would end up, as I'm trying to put pressure on bricks to complete further down the fuselage, that my little fingers would brush up against the chairs that were inside and just flick them off their studs, which did become a little annoying after a while. And I know some people have complained in the comments about the camouflage pattern that's on there, and now it's not that realistic. While I get what they're saying, I think that is a little subjective, because it does look to me to be pretty accurate to the camouflage from the early 80s that they seem to be running. And again, this is quite a large and heavy helicopter. I remember thinking, again, this one as I was building it, that you suddenly use it as a club and smack somebody over the head with it and do them some damage, which I don't recommend doing. But again, this, because of the width of the rotors, this one could be a little bit difficult to display. So just bear that in mind and get the exact diameter of the rotor. I think there's six on here, and you can tweak them a little bit. It's not as the rotors aren't as display friendly as the Vipers was, but you can squeeze it in just about. But I thought this was really good. Now, again, this one has changed massively in price since I bought it, or at least I found a place. I paid £24.04 for this, which at the time I was more than happy about. But I have seen this down as far as £15, and certainly if you see it down that sort of distance, then yeah, snap it up if you've got any interest in helicopters. So I am going to put you in the very good pile, as I enjoyed doing you. The J35, which I bought mistakenly thinking it was an F-35. But it turns out it was not. It was J35, which is the Chinese copy and paste version. And actually, as a model, it's really good. It is. I wouldn't say it was as good as its stablemate, the J15, because it strikes me that the J15 is a later model than the J35, and that the designers have learnt some things by doing the J35, or since doing the J35, and applied them to the J15, which does make it better. The munitions, and there are a lot of munitions with this aircraft, and they are very, very fragile. Probably up there with the F-14 as the most fragile under wing and underbody munitions there. But it is a really good model. The nozzles also at the back, actually, I seem to remember them being a little fragile. The undercarriage is very good. It will lock in place. Is it as good as the J15? No, not quite. It can be a little difficult, I feel, because of everything under the wings being so fragile. Can be a little bit difficult to manipulate. Not just in the later stages of the build, because a sensible person will leave all the missiles, bombs and fuel tanks off until the very, very last thing. But if you want to pick it up and examine it after you finished it, it's quite tricky to do that. But it was quite a good price. $25.73. It is bigger than the J15 and more parts. But it's, as I say, it's not as good as the J15. I don't think it's got the value of the J15. But there are a lot of the J35s out there, so you've got plenty of choice. So I'm going to pop this in the very good pile, because I don't think you'd be disappointed with that. And if you do plan on manipulating it, and you do plan on displaying it and never taking it apart, then to be honest with you, a drop or two of super glue for those missiles and bombs underneath takes care of most issues. So our very last model, that is the E2 by Harrier Bricks. Now Harrier Bricks, I think I've done 3 models by them, and they're very much a good, a bad and an ugly sort of thing with them. The MiG-29, definitely the bad. The F-14 was definitely the ugly, and unfortunately this was the good, and it is very good. It was very surprising, I have to say. After the MiG-29, I didn't expect massive amount of this, and it was just excellent, from the instructions to the transfers to the proportions, the ease of build. But that's not to confuse something being easy with not being worthwhile. It certainly was worthwhile to build and to do. It was just, it didn't give me a headache trying to build it. That's probably the best description. A lot more solid than you would think it is. And one thing that I hadn't really been prepared for, and I really didn't pick up on until right at the very end, until after I'd actually finished the model, was the fact that the wings will fold up. Not just the tail plane as such, which will sort of hinge and fold sort of towards upwards, but the actual half of the wing will fold backwards. They'll fold 90 degrees and then they'll fold backwards, which again, this is a reasonable sized plane. Similar sort of dimensions to the Catalina, but that solves a huge display issue. The fact that you can do that with one wing, which means you can get this on a roughly sort of standard 25-30 centimetre shelf somewhere quite happily and quite solidly. You don't have to worry about one of the wheels of the undercarriage being precariously close to the edge. It's I've got nothing bad to say about this. It's just excellent throughout. Arguably certainly the most surprising model of the planes that I had. It was great. I mean, it was £28. Again, this is another one that I've seen well under £20 since I bought this, and I can almost guarantee that if you see it under £20, snap it up. You're not going to be disappointed. That one, I'm afraid, goes up in excellent. So there we go. Out of the 21 aircraft that I've done this year, I would say that there's only really 6 that I would either tell you outright not to buy, or if you're thinking about it, think very carefully and have a look at any alternatives well before you press a button to say buy. So the fact that we've got 15 out of the 21 are recommended to one degree or another, I think is actually a really good thing, because it shows that a lot of these alternative manufacturers, it's not dross that they're putting out onto the market. Most of the models are pretty good. Most of the prices are pretty good. They're not necessarily the best, but they're pretty good, and certainly for the price that is being asked for them, I think that helps them compete with the likes of, let's say, Kobe, which are very, very good, but very, very pricey. The fact that you can pick up some of these models for a quarter or less of the price of some Kobe models, and there is not a lot of difference in the quality, I think is very, very good. There are certainly areas where all the manufacturers need to improve on, whether it's the design, whether it's the instructions, whether it's the quality of the bricks or the quality control before the model is sent out. They've all got something that they can improve on. But overall, most of these are certainly worth the money and the time and the effort of hunting them down and doing them. I think these are pretty good models. So that's the airplanes done, or the aircraft done for the year. Hopefully you enjoyed this. As I say, I've got the tanks and the ships and all the rest of the stuff coming shortly. So if you have, please like and subscribe to the channel. And then, until next time, you take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.